But why don't we just start really fast by giving like a nice little summary of what Allies to Refugees was and where it
Mhm.
was located?
Okay, sure. So, Allies to Refugees was a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and our purpose was to provide education or aid of, like clothes or food occasionally to displaced people. And the reason I said specifically displaced is because, um, like internally displaced people, we also wanted to help internally displaced people, not just refugees that were displaced outside of their country. So we had a school in Afghanistan, well, actually two schools in Afghanistan, one in a little camp for the displacement, and then one in Herat. And then we also had, for a very short time, a little school in Syria, and we were doing some like humanitarian projects occasionally, providing food or clothing in the wintertime and things like that. And then
Cute.
like our home quarters was in Utah. So
Yes.
that's where you and
Cute.
I were and all the board. Well, not all the board, but
Yes. So let's go back. So you said that there was two schools in Afghanistan. One was in the major city, Herat, and then the other one. Tell me a little bit about the smaller one.
yeah, so the smaller one was in a little it was like a displacement camp. And um there was within the camp there was basically like an orphanage for children whose parents had passed away or given them up or things like that. And so at that orphanage, they had been providing like classes and schooling services, but the funding was cut and they no longer had any funding. And so that's where Allies to Refugees was able to step in, and we were able to provide our own teacher for that and our own instruction. And it was so cool actually to like see the kids graduate. I don't know if you remember that like video we have of all of them. We should like insert that, but we were helping internally displaced people that were displaced inside of Afghanistan from, like, let's say they were living in, I don't know, like some outskirt or rural village and they were displaced and had to come to Herat. So we were finding people that were forced to leave their homes due to like violence or political unrest. Um, and a lot of the students that we were helping were women, which is really cool, and young girls as well. So every day they would walk to school, and we had like a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a, not a bodyguard, but security guard
Yeah.
that would help them, arrive and leave school safely and make sure that everyone made it safely, because it can be kind of scary,
Yeah.
walking to school. So.
Yeah, it's not a close journey. Um, okay, beautiful. And then you talked a little bit about Idlib, Syria. So tell us a little bit more about what was there.
Yeah, so we had for a short time, we had a little school that was actually in a tent. So quite different than in Afghanistan, because in Afghanistan, both of our schools had actual like buildings, and the one in Kabul was actually quite a large building. It was 2 stories and,
Yeah.
had a lot of rooms, and we had a big team there. It was like a team of, I think, 10 at the largest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and we had probably around 500 kids between the two schools at one point. So that was quite a lot bigger. And then the school in Syria in Idlib was just like 10 students. It started off really, really small. It started off in a tent. And our teacher, so cool, his name's Sari. Him and his wife started teaching the classes really with hardly any pay. I mean, like with almost no budget, just because they really wanted to help and they really wanted to do something meaningful. And I think it also gave him so much hope at the time, because like this was a few years ago. So this was before the war. Well, I guess the war hasn't really ended, but it was before the situation had changed and the regime was overthrown. So they were very much trapped there in Idlib, trapped there in that northern region. And so, yeah, there's a lot of students there and still are that don't have access to education.
Right. And I'm sorry, I feel like we are like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the listener being like, wait, what? Like, slow down. I'm already lost. So we'll get into more of the details shortly. But yeah, so that's a good distinction that so the majority of our funding when we were, doing really well with our donations and whatnot, the majority of it was going to funding the building in Herat that, as you said, like the 2-story building. We were taking care of like, I think we did like a lunchtime with some snacks, correct? And then we had like our supplies for the month. And then we also have to pay for the rent of that building, which was a large
Mhm.
portion. And then we wanted to pay the security guard because we felt that that was also a very highly important role to have there, as we were
Mhm.
essentially responsible for those children and those women during those times of the day. And then we had a photographer that we were also paying. Um, did I hit
And
that
then all
right?
the teachers, and then we also had a manager and then like a finance officer. So
Yeah,
yeah, we were providing salaries for everyone,
yeah.
which was cool.
Um, it was so cool. And so then, so after, that was taken care of, then we would look at, financing the second orphanage school. And then we also, as Makia said, Syria was one that was a little bit more of like a work in progress and like a future vision. So a
Mhm.
lot of times, whatever the remaining balance of those donations were would go and support some type of an initiative or maybe just a smaller project. Makia, do you want to talk a little bit as well about just, yeah, some of those smaller projects we did? Like, I know we did something for Ukraine once. Like,
Oh yeah.
even though we were located in Afghanistan and Syria, we were still looking at this larger
Mhm.
mission of, being an ally to any type of refugee and to any type of world crisis. And we were so determined that we would say, like, we're not going to stop until um this is over. Like, we were driven to complete this mission and this work, which we'll get into more. But
Still are. We still are.
yes, I know, I'm
Um,
sensing more work is coming just because this episode is starting. I feel
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Tell us
Yeah,
about
I
Ukraine.
mean, we did like we partnered with a church member in Ukraine who was a member of the LDS Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ. And he was delivering like food to just people in the community, not even just like, members of any specific church, but just everyone.
Mhm.
And so yeah, we were able to partner with him and we raised a bunch of donations, and then we got to watch him, go ahead and deliver all of those meals, which was really cool. And then in Syria, we did a few extra projects as well, where like in the wintertime, we had a family that we provided like clothes for them, like coats for they had these 2 little girls that were so cute. Oh my gosh. I have to like send you pictures. You can like insert it or something. But yeah, coats for them, and then like a whole bunch of groceries and things like that. And we
Because
did
it's
that a few different times.
it's like snowy and like freezing cold, like, and imagine living through those winter conditions in a tent. Like, you just
Yeah.
cannot. Or like giving birth in the winter in a tent with snow outside. So yeah, I remember we would like ramp up during like September. We would be like, okay, let's fundraise, to try and get some necessary supplies out to them to prepare them for winter. Um Okay, Makia. So I would love to go back to the beginning and have you talk for a minute about where this project started for you and how it came to be. Because I remember the story you told me about you laying on the floor in your living room, but I would love for you to tell it.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah. I don't know. So I finished university. I finished my degree, my college degree,
which is it.
and in music. It's in music, so totally unrelated.
It's so
But I've
beautiful.
been passionate for a long time about wanting to do some sort of humanitarian effort after I'd spent a year and a half in Canada. And Canada is really cool because it's very international, especially Toronto. They accept so many refugees and immigrants from all over the world. They're extremely welcoming. And so my time there, I was just able to see so much diversity and was so impacted by the amount of people I got to meet. And so when I finished college, I just really felt, a draw to do something like that, like some sort of humanitarian something, but I didn't know what. And right at the same time, the US pulled out of Afghanistan. And so it was like mass chaos over there. and everyone was like super upset about it. And I remember feeling so emotional about it, seeing like the news and stuff, and just feeling so frustrated about the way that the US pulled out and how like catastrophic it was and how poorly organized it was, and just learning so much more about what was going on in Afghanistan at the time. And so I felt really passionate about helping there, and that's where it started for me. And I was just like, talking to my husband at the time one day and was like, I feel so just like lost. Like, I just want to do something with this. Like, I want to, help people. And he was like, you know what? Just start. Just like do it. So I just went upstairs and I had like a little music room. And I just, right then and there, I just started incorporating, getting my like articles of incorporation, writing up like my business, um, like our business plan, and applying for our permits in Utah and at the federal level to get the 501c3. And kind of
Which
as I was going,
you have to
sorry, go
you
ahead.
have to you have to speak to how this was God's work, because typically you need to talk about the time it takes to get a 501c3 certificate and how long it took Allies to Refugees.
Oh yeah. It takes so long to get a 501c3 usually, like, and if you talk to any nonprofit founder, they usually say at least a year. Like, that's super common because like our government is so slow and there's so much bureaucracy. But it was so crazy. I kid you not. Like, as I was like typing everything up, I was like formulating it as I was going. Like, it was coming to me.
Mm.
And I probably finished all of like the articles of incorporation, like everything I had to do within like a month. I reached out to everyone. I got my board together. You were one of them. Talon was one of them, a few other people. And I had everything done, submitted it, and within like 3 months, I had my article, my 501c3. And
It's
like
ins-
other nonprofit founders that I knew just like did not believe me. They were like, that's not even possible.
yeah, you did it
It was
wrong or
crazy.
something. You're like, no,
Yeah,
it's
they were like, no. They were like, that's not even possible. Like, you're lying. And I was like, why would I lie? Like, I have literally no reason to lie. But yeah, it
yeah.
was so cool and it was so crazy. I do think, I mean, there was one section when I was submitting where like it allowed me to write like a plea for them to like do the processing faster. And I think at the time, because Afghanistan was such a big issue in the US, and I had said that our nonprofit was specifically to help with Afghanistan, I think that partially is what helped it to go through so much faster. But it
Yeah.
definitely felt like it was, kind of like God's will that he was like directing me in that way. And everything just clicked into place so easily. And honestly, ever since then, I've felt that this has been my purpose to help people in these situations. Um, so yeah, it was really cool.
Beautiful. I want to pause and then give like my end of like what was happening in my life to for that exact moment as well. So,
Yes,
because
please.
I think it's the same thing. Like we were really meant to cross paths. So, side note, me and Makia know each other from high school. Makia dated my cousin. So we're like long-term homies. But you know, you like leave high school and you move on with your life and you're like, I hope I never see anybody from high school ever again, because I don't know. That was my attitude towards everything. So when I connected with you, it was like actually really refreshing, because I was like, I actually don't really care to like connect with people from high school, but you were one of the girls that I was like, oh wait, I always liked her. Like what? Like we can be
Aw.
friends? Like, I was excited. But for me, I was just coming home from my humanitarian aid trip in Tanzania,
Mhm.
which is in Africa. And I was in security coming home, and I was just so like, of course I was so excited to see my children, but at the same time it was just so bittersweet. Like I was not really ready to come home. I was not ready to integrate back into normal reality and normal
Oh, I
life.
feel that.
And yeah, coming back to just like being a single mom. And it was like a year and a half after my divorce. And so, my life was still pretty raw at that time. And I remember just feeling a very straightforward prayer to God of, um, this is my work, this is my purpose in life, and I don't know how to continue to do that with the life that, like you and I have created together, God. With my new reality, I don't know how I'm able to do this thing that I feel so called to doing, with, being a single mom. But if there is a will, there is a way, and I believe that you will provide that way. That was like I'm not kidding. I said that to myself. I said that to God in the customs coming back to the United States. And I'm on Instagram and I'm scrolling and I see one of your videos that you had just recently posted. And
On like
I
the
wish,
Allies to Refugees account?
yes, I wish I knew which post it was, but it brought me to immediate tears. And I was like, whose nonprofit is this? What is this? I didn't know it was yours.
Oh,
And
that's so
so
dope. I didn't know that you didn't know it was mine.
I didn't. And so I reached out, and we could probably go back in our messages and look, but I reached out
No,
and I was like, "Hi, my name is Ella. Like, I think I saw that like you had the location pinned as like Utah, and so I was really confused. But I was like, "Hi, I'm coming home from Africa right now. I would love to get involved and like sit down and see." And I was really just asking for a volunteer opportunity. I knew that I wanted, to get deeper into leading an organization farther down the road, but I thought there's no way that that's going to work out right now. So if I
Mhm.
could just like get some volunteer hours, I would love to do that on the side. That would really like fill my cup. And you were like, "Hi, yeah, like it's me or something." And I was like, "What? It's you? Like this? You did this? Like I was like, catch me up immediately." And and I remember that you had said like, "Let's have a meeting. Like let's discuss. Like I need support." And so I like got on this meeting call with you as like a preliminary. It kind of I thought it was like an interview of like to be a volunteer. And on the call, you were just like, "I need support. I need a co-founder." And I remember just like just dropping to my knees with gratitude to God, just like
Aw,
when you ask God
know
for
that?
something. Yes, like when you ask God for something, like don't be surprised when he gives you exactly what you want. Like
Right.
we need to give the credit to God. Like he wants to provide those opportunities for each of us. And so I just it was just like such a better offer than I could have imagined. And I was just like looking for a little bit of, side volunteer work, but you were like, "No, do this with me." And I was like, immediate yes. And I had no idea, how like all of the leadership that goes into that, and the
Right.
late nights, the long hours, the fundraising, the grind of it, which let's get into, but that was one
So
side of
long.
it. So
No, but I
what?
was so glad when you reached out because I seriously had been needing someone because I mean, as you figured out, it's just like draining.
Mhm.
And I mean, not draining because it like fills you up, but at the same time, I was like, I need help, to keep this
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
And so, yeah, but you just can't have anyone, you can't just have anyone. You have to have someone who's equally as passionate. And
yeah.
that is so hard to find. But I
So
totally found that in you. So it was way
yeah,
cool.
I love that. So tell me if there is a specific memory tied to allies to refugees or tied to a family that really is hard for you to forget or that will always stick with you.
Oh, there's so many. Give me a moment to think about which one I would want to choose.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of the stories that have stood out to me weren't necessarily like stories of like, success or like, necessarily what we helped with. It was more just getting a glimpse into the actual lives of these people as I became friends and close with them and actually got to, have regular conversations with them on like an actual friendship level day to day and realizing like the emotional toll that it takes on people and having an actual glimpse into their culture and their life. Um, and just, I feel like so much of the world is like so unaware, especially so much of the US. And I say
Totally.
that because I was so unaware.
Mhm.
But I remember like specifically when we had our school in Afghanistan. I don't know if you remember this, but we had a meeting with Morris and Monis, our manager and our finance manager,
Mhm.
and they let us know that at the school in I'm like blanking on the name right now, but at the
That's
school in the camp,
Mhm.
there was a dad who was gonna take his daughter out of school because he was gonna sell her to be a bride, like a child bride. because they just like had no other like source for money. And so Morris and Monis and a few of our like female teachers reached out to him and like talked to him and convinced him not to. And he actually ended up selling his kidney instead. So that story was crazy because I remember even talking to them after that and being like, wow, I'm so glad we were able to like step in and like, advocate for this girl. And I remember the feeling of feeling so powerless because like we didn't really have any financial help that we could offer, even though I would have loved to.
Mhm.
But then also having Morris and Mona say to us, okay, this time we saved her, but when this
That's
money from his kidney runs out, you
mhm.
know, what's his
Is
next option, right?
it-
And there's so many girls in Afghanistan that unfortunately become child brides, and it's really just purely about money for the family. They're like in survival and they don't know how else to provide. And unfortunately, it's very normalized in a lot of, not every home. It's not normalized in every home, but a lot of the homes it is normalized in.
Mhm.
So that was one story that really stuck out to me.
Do you remember
There
how old she was?
No, I don't remember, but she was young. I think she was like 12, between 12 or 14, something like that. So really young.
And do you think the word child bride is a gentler word for just trafficking?
I don't think it's gentler, no, but it is a word for trafficking. Yeah.
It's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, I mean that's what it is. And it's unfortunately in the world a lot of just violence against any person, whether it's a woman or a man or any person, unfortunately comes from a lot of times people in the family or people that they know.
Mhm.
Um because those people tend to have the most power and the most influence in that person's life and the most ability to, control and pressure and persuade. And so, and also, there's this sense of like duty that the girl may have towards her family where she feels like, she wants to provide for them and she wants to sacrifice for them. And so a lot of times she may even, unwillingly, but like somehow kind of willingly agree because of this like psychological
Like
game.
pressure. I need to
Yeah,
support the family. I want to
exactly.
say, I think that that's like a really important thing to talk about is like, um, I could probably get like some criticism for saying this and I don't care, but like to us, to our reality, it's like, how dare you? How could you be such a
Right.
negligent parent? To them, living in such a survival based environment, where this is happening all the time, uh, and probably, within the families as well, it's like you truly don't know what you would do in that situation until you're in that situation. And so
Right.
I think a part of our mission is or was to provide more options, more resources, and more education. Um,
Hmm.
not even just like learning to read and write, which was a huge part of what we did, but also just being able to expand, with well, this is how our world operates. This is how your world operates. There has to be other solutions and other resources that we can create and collaborate on where we're not going in to change the way of your culture. That was something that we never wanted to do or to change, but really getting in on their level and understanding where they're at versus us saying, well, we have the best ideas and let's just
Hmm.
push those onto this country. That was never something that we um
Right.
were there to do.
Right. And I
So
think that's one thing that I've also learned from all my time with, getting to know different, cultures in these countries, because it's extremely, extremely different than our culture.
yeah.
Um, is that I think a lot of people from the Western world come in with really good intentions, wanting to, you know, educate or save or change lives or people.
Yes, yes.
But because they so deeply do not understand the culture and do not understand the context and do not understand the language or the family or the religion, they can really make the situation so much worse and
Yeah.
harder. And, what you or I may think is the right solution can actually end up tearing the family apart and really causing, worse problems. So these kinds of situations have to be dealt with
I've been through
so,
that.
so delicately.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said, and even a bigger divide within the countries, right? Like, oh,
Right.
like I have girlfriends that are from other parts of the world that have told me their firsthand experience of witnessing a different person from a different culture coming into their country and being so nice when they want to get the pictures, like, oh, I'm here in this country doing this work. Photo, 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 photo. Then the camera goes away, and then they're a different person to the people, and they're, then they leave, and yeah, so I think that's something that's really big is what you're talking about, which is go with the right intentions and be okay to be corrected because yeah, we're nobody's trained on this, and you're
Right.
gonna make mistakes and you're gonna maybe say the wrong thing or have the wrong assumption or we were educated improperly on these countries and just going to the people and going to the roots to learn what they need is
Yeah,
something
I
that
think actually that's such a true statement. Like, I really think we were, like, as a Western society, like, so wrongly indoctrinated about these countries, honestly. Um, and just so misinformed in a lot of ways, or just informed under the wrong context. A lot of, I think, the news or the media that we see is from a Western perspective and has an agenda.
um,
Um, and so it doesn't really provide the real perspective of what's going on in these families. And this is not, I'm not saying in any way I ever think, a child bride is a good idea. I'm not saying that at
right.
all.
We're not saying that.
I'm just trying to express that these cultures can be so deeply misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I think at the core of it really is like the family in these cultures are so strong. And like
Yeah.
in the US, for example, like you got divorced, I've been divorced, and that really wasn't a problem for our families, right? Our
Right.
parents supported us. We are free
Yeah.
to divorce if we want to divorce.
Move on.
But
Hmm.
but in these societies, a lot of them marry, like, for example, their cousin. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is actually because it makes the marriage in that family stronger. So that it's almost like impossible to divorce, because if the two, kids divorce, then the parents that are, brother and sister or brother and brother then have a feud between them. So the whole family unit from both sides is so motivated to keep this marriage together, um, which makes it a lot of times, like I said, it's so strong that a lot of times it eliminates their ability to choose, because
Yeah.
they will risk destroying the whole fabric of the family if they, wanted a divorce or didn't want to go through with that marriage. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, so many good things. Okay, I want to honestly go back into understanding refugee crisis and what that means a little bit deeper. So we're going back again.
Okay.
For people who aren't really familiar with this word or maybe have like a 1D, 2D type, concept of what refugee crisis means, is there anything that you can provide or context you can provide into what situations are happening that get somebody into this moment of being a refugee and then also the devastation of the impact that this has on the rest of their life?
Right. Well, I think people are so unfair to refugees, honestly, because, like, who wants to be displaced from their country, right? Who
Yeah.
who would rather live in another country where they're not welcome and where their people are racist against them, right?
Yeah.
When they would, if they had the choice to stay in their own
Yeah. It's
homeland,
all the
they
time here in the United
they
States.
would.
It's happening right now. It's happening right
Exactly. And so I think people are really unfair to refugees because they don't understand that the refugee probably doesn't actually want to be there.
now.
It's more of like out of a necessity type thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
So a lot of these situations, I'll give you like a few, and bear with me because I don't want it to like get too complicated. But for example,
Yeah.
in Syria, we just saw the brutal regime of Bashar al-Assad, and anyone who was against him was in immediate political danger. Okay. So they were pushed to the north of Syria, where they were basically trapped in between the border of Turkey or the border to like the regime area. So they can't go into the regime area because they'll get killed. They can't go into Turkey because the border is so unbelievably secure and so many refugees died trying to cross that border. So they're really
Yeah.
trapped like a prison, or were trapped like a prison, kind of like what you're seeing in Gaza now.
Hmm.
And same with Afghanistan. I mean, they're really trapped, right? Right now, anyone who wants to leave Afghanistan has to go through extremely difficult measures, probably, to be able to leave. And really, the only reason that people are leaving these situations is because if they stay, they will literally die, right?
Yeah.
It could be a lot of reasons. It could be, politically, they're not safe. They'll be arrested, they'll be imprisoned, they'll be tortured and killed. It could
Violence.
be
Yeah.
Right. It could be there's no jobs available and they can't provide for their family. They can't eat. How are they going to live? They're going to die. So they're forced to leave, right? It could be like family disputes, like,
Hmm.
they're forced into a marriage that they don't want. And when they try to get out of it, it creates literally a war between the two families. So,
I think it's also
um, you know,
human. I, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I think human rights are also a big part of this. Like, the
mhm.
women have very different rights in these countries to where, the rights that you and I have, whether that is lack of funding, I'm sorry, lack of education.
No, but I'm glad that you actually touched on that on about the women's rights things, because I actually think one thing that we really emphasize a lot in the US is like women's rights, but people actually forget about the men in these situations. And I would actually argue that a lot of the men are equally as oppressed as the women. You get, young boys that are expected to provide for their family from a very young age. Which is an enormous burden for a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, even a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. That's an enormous burden to provide for your whole family. To go off and be forced to serve as a soldier or work as a smuggler or work in, like any like concrete construction, like any really tough job, any job you can find to provide for your family. A lot of the boys also aren't really given a choice when it comes to marriage, whether they want to or not. You know, they are assigned and they must marry, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it really makes me sad because I feel like people are so compassionate towards the women and girls in these situations. You always hear about like what's going on in Gaza right now, how people are like, oh, this many children were killed or this many women were killed. And it's almost like the men have to prove their humanity. Like,
Yeah.
oh, he was a good man, right? Now we're sad that he died. He was so gentle. He would always like feed the cats, like all the stray cats or something, to make it seem like he had humanity. But what people don't understand in these situations is the men are so isolated. They are so like expected to provide for the family with no one to rely on. They have no mental health support because
Yeah.
they live in this culture where like crying is like not manly. They have no one to like rely on to talk to, and they take it on as their burden to shield, their mom and their sisters and their wives from that emotional burden of caring for the family or, what's going on with them.
Hmm.
And so they become very isolated. And I think it's really a tragedy how the men in these situations are not supported and they're not talked about. Even like in the Western world, people are always like talking about women's rights, and for good reason. Women should have rights, and a lot of them don't
Right.
have rights, especially like in Afghanistan right now. But, like in Gaza and Syria, yeah, there's a lot of oppression to the men
That's
as
so
well.
true. That's a good reminder. I've always been sensitive about that, whether it's like me reading the Bible or learning about anything. Whenever it's like, oh, but there were women and children involved, I'm like, yes, and there's men, and we're all a human life. Like, you care for
Right.
everybody, or you don't care for anybody. It's everyone. Everyone deserves a chance to live, a chance to be, educated, and everyone deserves that. And
Right.
anyways,
And like if you
um,
look at what's going on in Gaza right now, like look at the videos when they're going to get food from like the, humanitarian organization.
all of them.
Who is it? It's all men. It's almost
And
all
they're
men.
being shot at. They're being
And
shot
it's
at.
even like young men, like young boys, because
Yeah.
they are the ones who are charged with going out to care for their family. And what I've seen from my experience in these cultures is that these boys are so soft-hearted, they're so loving, they take it so seriously, they never want to see their mom cry. That's like a huge thing I've noticed. You
Mhm.
know, and so they protect her, they protect their own mom from, you know, their own emotions. Whereas I feel like growing up, you know, here in the US, I very much felt like if I had a burden, I could lay it on my mom. You know, I
Mhm.
could go to her and lay it on her because that was culturally appropriate. Whereas in their culture, it's not necessarily that they can't lay it on their mom, but culturally, it's like their way of protecting the women is that they don't like lay that burden on them. So,
Mm, that's so interesting.
yeah.
Um, it's good perspective of just like into the culture as well. So the UN Refugee Agency reports that as of 2025, there's 122 million um, displaced persons in the world, and UNICEF reports that over 40% of that number is children, which is
Mhm.
devastating. And I can only imagine that that number is growing with Congo, Gaza, Sudan, the multiple genocides that are all happening all at once. From your experience, and I know that you're still very closely tied into a lot of this culture. What and you've lived abroad. Right now you're in, we didn't even speak to this, you're in Austria right now. But what are some of the most common misconceptions when it comes to the word refugee?
Misconceptions. Oh, you know, one that drives me crazy is
What?
when they're like, "Oh, they have no food. How do they have a phone?"
Mm,
I'm like, "They had a phone before the war started." What is their phone
right?
just going to disappear? No.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, a phone really isn't that expensive. In most of these countries, you can buy a phone for like $100, which is a lot cheaper than buying food every day. Like in Gaza, one food for a family right now is like $100 for a day. That's like the
Yeah.
price of a phone, you know? So if they had, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I feel like people are really unlogical a lot of times about the way that they talk about things in a very uneducated way, or they're like, you know, oh, like she looks chubby, so how is she starving? Or things like that.
Yes.
Drive me
Yes, it's like,
crazy.
oh, instead of you judging what you're seeing, just put your dollar to it. Like,
Right.
if like I don't understand like this whole let me judge the situation before I decide if it's worth sending my money. I'm just like, if you have money and you have privilege, help. That's it. That's just
Right.
that's just what I believe.
Well, I
Um
wouldn't say just, you know, send it to anywhere, but like if you can help, then, you know, help. And I think another big misconception is like that the people get blamed very much
mm,
so for the situation that they're in. Like people will say, well, then, you know, then they shouldn't have started the war, or then they shouldn't have done this, or then they shouldn't have da 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 da. Like making
yes.
excuses for why they're being victimized and why it's acceptable to, you know, commit such violence against them. And
Yeah.
obviously, you know, there is a portion of, you know, the population who may have, you know, committed crimes or started a war or whatever the case may be, the political unrest in
Mhm.
whatever various country it is. But the general majority of the population is just like trying to live and exist as any
Yeah.
normal human being would want to and needs to and provide for their family. You know,
Oh,
these kids and these families, the majority of them have nothing to do with anything and didn't do anything. Their only crime was that they were born in, you know,
yeah.
Sudan or Gaza or Syria or Afghanistan or, you know, wherever, or Ukraine or
Mhm.
Russia or North
Yeah.
Korea, you know. So I think it's
Yes.
really unfair to, you know, blame them for whatever situation is they're going through.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell me about what the the mental health, the education, the reality of what displacement does to your day-to-day life?
Yeah, ooh, I can speak really well to that.
Yes, you can.
I can. Um, I would say the hardest thing about displacement, like people from the outside might think like, oh, the hardest thing would be, not having electricity or not having like a stable home or not having food. But
Hmm.
when I was thinking about this today, preparing for our podcast, I think the hardest thing actually is what it does to the families in these situations of war and violence. Trust is lost
Mm.
completely. And people, because, like, for example, we don't think about this, right? But let's say you're in Gaza right now. Absolutely everywhere you go is a checkpoint. Okay. You can't have any photos in your phone. You can't have any conversations in your phone. You can't have literally anything in your phone, right? So, where do you save your memories? Right?
Mm.
You can't trust anyone. You don't know, if you can share a political opinion of yours. You don't know if you can share like your grief, your mourning, anything, because you can be blamed, suspected for anything. Same thing in Syria right now, even though there's been a regime change, there are checkpoints everywhere, right? Everywhere you go, you want to go to the grocery store, there's a checkpoint. Someone's going to check your phone. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
going to check your ID. So it's almost like you have to be a perfect citizen. You can't have any kind of like anything that would make you in any way be of suspicion of any kind.
Be
And
alive. Yeah.
yeah, and so that mental toll of constantly feeling like you're being watched, feeling like you have no one that you can trust, even within families, within neighborhoods, people betray each other, really. And that's the cause of war. War really breaks down trust among people.
Mm.
And, you know, for example, if I'm struggling with food insecurity and I don't have food, but I have my family and I have, a safe home to come to and I have people that I can lay down my burden on and we can all work together, right? Then we can come up with solutions, right? Or if I was like couldn't pay my bills, I can go to my parents' house, right?
Yeah.
But these people have such a breakdown in society where it comes to they have no one to rely on. They have no one to go to. And people are in such survival mode that it comes to where they're only able to even take care of themselves, not even their family. So that's what I've personally seen firsthand. I've seen how that really breaks people down. Then the lack of like opportunities, the lack of hope is a huge one as well.
Right.
Because for example, like let's say in Gaza right now, like there's no like hope for a ceasefire right now. Nobody knows when the war is going to end, right? It's so much easier to sign on for suffering if you know when the end date is.
Mm.
So, they're just suffering and they don't know when it's going to end. So how would you not feel broken? How would you not feel, that you're at a point of just
You're
like
forgotten.
surrender, you
That the
know?
whole, yeah, the whole world has
Yeah, and
forgotten.
I kind of think of it like a horse. Like when the Europeans came to the United States and they captured all these wild horses and they decided to domesticate them, they would call it breaking the horse, right? They would keep the horse in this corral, they would chain it to like a post like what you see in the movie Spirit, and they wouldn't let it eat and they would let it stay there until its spirit was broken, until it had no fight left, you
Mm.
know? And I feel like anyone, almost anyone, can overcome whatever situation that they're in if they know when the end date is, if they know that there's hope, if they know that there's something to look forward to. And what I've seen is the biggest breaker for people is that mental feeling of when is the end date. And that's the same thing in Syria. Like, during these last 14 years of war, everyone that was trapped in Idlib was like, when is there going to be jobs available? When will I be allowed to travel? When will I be allowed to get a passport? When will I be allowed to go to school? When will I be allowed to literally do anything, And
Yeah.
even today, having the war change so much in Syria, it's still like they're living under fear, under oppression, under constant surveillance, under checkpoints, or in Afghanistan, these women are living so incredibly oppressed right now and there's no like end date,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine that emotional toll. Or even like my friend, my really close friend, she's displaced right now. She's from
Yeah.
Afghanistan. She's in Pakistan
She's
and
going to
she's
be
going
on
to
the
find,
podcast.
Yeah, she's going to be on the podcast. She's been
Yeah.
applying for years to come to the US.
Yeah.
You know, people try to go the legal route, but they're in such a desperate situation and there's so much bureaucracy and a lot of times the requirements are so unobtainable.
Yeah.
You know, even if someone wants to like sponsor their spouse to come to Austria or something. I have a friend at a restaurant where I work here in Austria. He's from Syria. He just sponsored his wife to come here. You have to have like a certain income threshold. She has to have a certificate that she can speak German to a certain degree. There's like so many papers you have to get, then you have to get them translated, which costs money. Everything costs money. The visas cost money. Getting a passport costs money. Like so many things cost money. Or even if you want to go with a smuggler, that costs money. So I think
Can
people
I
feel just this sense of hopelessness where there's no way out.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's
Can I
really the biggest battle.
sorry,
No,
something
you're good.
something that I feel like is re- really helped me understand what displacement um was when you broke down to me one time, like, we always have that question that's like dropped at church, right? Like, if it's the end of the world and you have to leave your house right now, what are you grabbing? Right? There's always like my photo, my book of my photos and my sacred texts and my children, and you're leaving. That is a
Mhm.
very real reality for, as I said, 122 million people on this earth right now, and we know some. Um, and I've heard some of those stories from their mouths. And the stories that come are just the most insane story that you wouldn't believe it, if they told it to you. It just doesn't seem like that could happen in the reality of the world that we fortunately get to live in. And when you think about that question, I'm not really trying to paint the picture of what you are grabbing. I'm trying to paint the picture of what you're not grabbing, which is wallet, medical cards, um, passports, IDs, if you have those things, um, vaccination cards, like all of these little things
Yes.
you need to enroll your child in school in the next country you move to, that you need to go to the doctor, that you need to book a flight, that you need to be able to apply for a job. You don't have an identity anymore. Once you leave in the
Right.
middle, when the bombs are dropping, when your country is under attack and under war, and there is havoc and there is chaos and everyone's screaming, and there's bodies on the sides of your neighborhood and on your road and in your streets, you are grabbing your babies and you are running. And think about when you're traveling on a trip, you guys, and you're just like, oh, I get to pack for my trip and I can't wait to go. And then like you pack everything and you feel so prepared for your trip, and then once you're on the plane, you're like, oh, I forgot my phone charger, or whatever it is. You're always forgetting something, right? So
Yep.
imagine you that's you in like your top prepared moment. So imagine you when you're in a full displacement of war, what you're grabbing and what you're not grabbing. That's setting your future up immediately. And so these people find themselves, and we're not even really getting into the story of like how much work it is to travel to who knows where, whether it's in the daytime or in the nighttime. Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have sustainable things that are going to get you through your journey to wherever it is you're traveling to? And then, as you said, Makia, like you're probably going to be running into officials, and then they're going to try and question who you are, where you're coming from, and you may be oppressed in that moment. You may be put in prison for trying to leave, and it just sets your future up for this full unknown. But in that moment, you feel that anything is better than the reality of your world. And so I feel like we've honestly answered so many of the last questions I had about how displacement in Syria and Afghanistan and what we learned through the nonprofit translates to Gaza. And, with the last episode that was released, we're working really hard right now to get in contact with Anas Al-Sharif's family members and create a fundraiser for his family. As we shared his last words, his wishes was for the world to circle around his family and take care of them. So my question is, what is something that allies to refugees um, wants to communicate to the world right now, Makia, as the nonprofit, is no longer up at this time? What is it that we want to communicate to the world?